All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the scheduling presentation. My name is Ben Baptist. I'm the lead assistant principal at Lakeview.
My name is Ryan Max. I am one of the school counselors here, and I'll be working with the 7th graders next year. So I will get to be your school counselor once you get up to the junior high.
We also have Rachel Hannigan with us tonight. She is the building principal, as well as Sarah Geiger. She is the another school counselor as well. She will primarily be working with the 8th grade students next year. They are going to be feeding us some questions that come in during tonight's presentation. So if you do have questions, please put those in the chat and they will communicate those to us either during the presentation or when we get to the Q&A session at the end. Just a few things that we will cover tonight. We're going to start by covering what our bell schedule looks like next year. It's a little different compared to this year. We're also switching from trimesters to quarters and semesters. We'll also go over what the scheduling hub is and what it looks like, as well as the scheduling process and your last day to schedule for courses. We have a couple different things to go over with your core and elective class offerings. And then, like I said, we will finish with a question and answer session at the end.
All right, so first we want to talk about what a typical day is going to look like next year at Lakeview. So this is what our bell schedule will look like. So you'll have 8 class periods throughout the day, plus this time in the middle of the day between 2nd and 3rd period called paw time and E&I. And one of the first things that a lot of our students notice when they see our bell schedule at the junior high is that 7:15 start time, which is very early in the morning and earlier definitely than when we're starting school in 6th grade. So something to remember as we get closer to August, that probably have to wake up earlier next year to get to school on time, which also probably means you have to go to bed earlier to get to school on time and feel like you're ready to learn and ready to be here. What that also means is that our school day ends at 2:10. So students are getting home sometime around 2:30 if you're riding the bus. You've got a lot of time after school to still have the rest of your day ahead of you, get some work done or start your other activities. So it's an early start time, but also an early end time. Something else that you'll see on our bell schedule here is that there are 5 different lunch periods, 3rd through 7th period. So one of those lunch periods you will be assigned for each quarter. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And then we'll also talk a little bit more about what paw time and E&I is going to be like as we keep going through our slides here. So this is what the quarter system looks like. And this, I promise this looks a lot more confusing than it is, or at least I hope. So we just wanted to illustrate that there is the entire year that you can think about broken into 4 equal parts, and those are the different quarters. And the way that it seems like it can be confusing is that some classes last for different amounts of time than others. So all of your core classes will always be the exact same class period, and they'll last all year long in that same spot. So if you have math first period, you'll always have math first period. Paw time will always be between 2nd and 3rd period, that paw time and E&I split class, and we'll talk more about what that is in just a second. But that'll always be at the same time of day, and it'll be all year long as well. Some of your electives and your lunch period might occur in different periods throughout the year. So you'll always have a lunch, but it might be at different times. And then the tricky part is that some of your electives are 2 quarters, some of them are 1 quarter, some of them are 4 quarters, some of them last all year. And you can see all that information in Infinite Campus when you're going to select your classes, and in some of the resources we have for you as you're exploring the scheduling hub, which we'll get to as well. You can see how long each of those classes last. But your core classes will always be the same. Your elective classes are different lengths, and we'll talk more about what paw time is as we continue going. But this is how you can kind of think about how quarters work for next year at Lakeview.
So again, paw time is going to be between 2nd and 3rd period. Right now, in our current setup, paw time is at the very beginning of the day for only 15 minutes. We really wanted to maximize the time that we have for students in paw time, but also link it with our E&I, which stands for enrichment and intervention. So if you remember that bell schedule from a few slides ago, paw time is actually going to be 50 minutes between 2nd and 3rd periods. So this is going to be a time that's considered the student's homeroom class. There are no grades. It's not going to show up on their grade card. It's time for conversations, activities, team building activities, and building relationships with students and teachers as they do morning check-ins, some social emotional learning activities just to develop better relationships with the kids and really have those conversations about how we can better the school and the student experience in the school. And again, that's linked with enrichment interventions. This is also going to be a time if students feel that they might need some extra help, or maybe they have a test coming up and they want to meet with a teacher who's available during that time to get a little extra studying in. That's a time for that. So it's really going to be a beneficial time with that extended time of 50 minutes between second and third period.
And one thing I wanted to add that we didn't mention before, that I really like about the way our schedule is going to work for next year, is that you'll have 1 or 2 classes, those first 2 classes of the day, and then you kind of get a break. Mm-hmm. We have that pause time built in, so you get a break after being here for a couple of classes. And I know that the idea of coming up to the junior high can be stressful, and there's more classes and maybe more work that you're thinking about, but you get that break after a couple of classes. And then a little bit later in the day, you'll have lunch, you'll get another break. And then one thing we haven't talked about is the inclusion of study halls for next year as well. So there will be breaks built into your schedule to help the transition into 7th grade. So it won't be just all work all of the time. We're going to try to make your schedule so that you can do your best in your class and then also take a break and kind of rest and relax and form those positive relationships at school.
Mm-hmm. So the scheduling process, scheduling basics, what you need to consider is we have already registered you for your core classes. So your 4 cores, English, math, science, and social studies, those are already in your schedule. Those have already been requested and registered for you. You need to go in and register for your electives. What we're asking you to do, if you think back to how our quarter and semester schedule is set up and you think about the electives, some electives are only 1 quarter, some are 2, and some are full year. At the end of your registration, you need to make sure that you have registered for at least 8 quarters of electives. And keep in mind that some of those electives are going to be a full year. So those take up 4 quarters. So if you're in band, choir, orchestra, Spanish or French, those are taking up 4 quarters because they're year-long electives. So make sure, again, that you have, when you look at the electives you have requested, you've requested at least 8 quarter units of electives.
And with that, when we go to the scheduling hub, we'll talk about where some more information is about how you may have ended up placed in the class that you're placed in. Mm-hmm. If you have questions about that for your core classes, the gifted services staff in Pickerington and for the junior highs, Todd Stanley and Leanne Ross are wonderful. They're the people to ask about placement questions or anything related to gifted services. So if you have questions about that, once you get in there and see which classes you're scheduled for, and you check out the videos that we've made to help explain, you still have questions, Todd Stanley and Leanne Ross are the best people to reach out to. All right, so we are going to start taking a look at the scheduling hub. And this is what the scheduling hub looks like. And Rachel is going to drop a link into the chat so that you all can follow along while you're watching. This link is also, you can find this on the Lakeview website. You can also find this in the Google Classroom, hopefully through your students' 6th grade team at the middle school, and in the parent newsletters that have been going home last week, if not the last 2 weeks. So this is what the hub looks like. And the most important thing that we want to draw your attention to is right up at the top off the bat. There's kind of these 4 steps that you'll go through to get acclimated with the hub, watching this welcome video, watching the how to schedule video, and checking the timeline for any more important dates as you're going through. So those videos are going to cover a lot of the information that we just shared, as well as show you kind of step-by-step how to get into Infinite Campus, which buttons to click, how many classes you have to register for, all of those kind of logistics of getting in and choosing your classes. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of information on here. We put everything that we thought you could possibly want to know about scheduling all in one place. And then we also put some stuff that you probably don't want to know about scheduling, but it's on here too. You can find a link to the course of study, which has a written description of all of the classes in Pickerington at the junior high level. So you can read a little bit about what those classes are. And as you're exploring different electives, a lot of our electives in the last year or so, the teachers and students have made videos to explain what that class is like, the kind of stuff that you'll be doing in there, and just give a richer explanation about what those classes are. So you can click on some of these links and check out the elective videos as well as you explore to figure out what you're interested in for next year and what's going to make your 7th grade year the most interesting for you. All right, so there's a lot of information on there, including, like I mentioned, those math, science, English, and social studies courses videos, if you have questions about those as well. And just a lot, this is the best place to start. A lot of your questions are probably answered on here somewhere. And if you still have questions at the end of that, drop them in the chat right now if you'd like. We'll have question and answer in just a moment. And there's also a Google form down at the bottom of this page that you can use to send questions to our counselor admin team here or at Ridgeview, and somebody will get back to you with an answer to your specific question.
We have a lot of new electives planned for next year as well. So there are some, you mentioned that there are videos from previous years for electives, but you will also notice that there are not videos for some electives. These are because we added a lot of new electives for next year, which is something we're really excited about. But again, check out the course of study if you want a little more specifics as to what that course description is. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any one of us.
All right, we are just about wrapping up our presentation here. Before we move to question and answer, we want to talk a little bit more about some of the elective and core classes that are offered, specifically the high school credit classes. So Ben's going to talk about that.
So we have a few elective offerings that can earn the student high school credit, depending on how they do. So some of these semester electives are Theater 1. These would be half credit for high school credit. There are no prerequisites for Theater 1. It is a very popular course, but there are no prerequisites to get into the course. Another semester elective is PE 9. So students to get into PE 9, again, this will be a quarter credit course, but they need to first take regular PE, course 882, and earn a C or higher, and then they are eligible to take PE 9. Some year-long high school credit electives are Spanish 1. These are all full credit offerings. There are some prerequisites that you can read through there, but Spanish 1, Spanish 2, and French 1 are some year-long high school credit offerings. And then with those high school credit classes, these are just things to consider. They do look really nice on the transcript, but they are at a different level because they are high school level courses and they are earning high school credit, but they're also putting grades already on that high school transcript that eventually carries through senior year. So again, just keep these bullet points in mind if you are considering high school credit courses, because it's good information to know as you are wondering if you're ready for that or if you might want to push it off for another year and wait till 8th grade.
All right, so as we're having this conversation, we've got a little less than 2 weeks left in the scheduling window. So through the end of this week and then end of next week, Friday, March 11th is the last day to go into Infinite Campus and make those selections for your elective requests for next year. So you'll want to make sure that you get in there, like Ben mentioned, and have at least have your 8 units for electives requested, and also make sure that you have at least 4 alternate electives selected as well, so that if we can't fit you into all of the classes that you prefer as your top choice, we can still make a schedule that will be one that you will enjoy for next year. We don't have to just guess and fill in some of the blanks. So make sure you have those alternates chosen as well by Friday, March 11th. There's not a big final important looking submit button, but once you get all of those selected in there, rest assured they're saved, and we'll be able to see them. Just make sure you get them in by Friday, March 11th.
And you mentioned study halls earlier. So with the 8 quarter unit of elective courses, you can have up to 12. So if you take 8, you will be registered or scheduled for 4 study halls, probably 1 per quarter. So just keep that in mind, is that if you only register for 8 or maybe 9 quarter credits of electives, the remaining number up to 12 would be the number of study halls that you have throughout the year. At this point, I think we are ready for our Q&A session. So I'm sure we have questions that have come in already. If you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat. Like I said, Mrs. Hannigan and Mrs. Geiger are monitoring that, and they will either respond to you through the chat or they'll give it to us and we can respond through the stream.
So can you explain the difference between paw time and study hall? Because they were told that paw time is not a time where they can work on schoolwork.
You want to take that?
Sure. Okay. So for the most part, that's true. Paw time is not intended to be that study hall. Paw time is intended to help us build a positive culture at school. So we're going to take some intentional time during the school day to do some of that team building, that relationship building between students and also between student and staff, so that everybody feels like they belong and that they have somebody that they can go to if they have a question, or just somebody that's going to check in on them throughout the day. We're going to use paw time very intentionally for that type of community building, rather than a quiet study hall time in the middle of the day. You can have access to that study hall as well, but paw time will be intentionally used for that, building that positive culture and climate.
And then the E&I component.
So E&I is our enrichment and intervention time. So this is more, it's not really a study hall. This is more targeted work. If students have questions, they have time devoted in that E&I period where they can ask their teachers questions. With their study hall period, their teachers may not necessarily be available during that time. So E&I is a common time throughout the building. So students would have time to get with teachers if they need more clarification on an assignment. Maybe they just took a test and they'd like feedback on the results. Maybe they just wrote a paper and they want to understand the teacher's comments a little better. That's that time for E&I, where students can get a little more targeted support. And students who are doing really well may have some enrichment opportunities in those classes as well to extend their learning.
Can you let them know that we keep trying to share the link for the scheduling hub and it is not letting us?
Okay. For whatever reason, it's not letting them share the link for the scheduling hub, so they are working on that as best they can. So hopefully they'll figure that out. But I do know that Mrs. Hannigan is going to send it out,
And it's linked on their time.
and it's also linked on the timeline document, the scheduling timeline document. There should be a link to the hub on there as well.
Mm-hmm. And as we've been having these conversations at the middle schools, most, if not all, of the teams at your students' middle school have posted the hub in the Google Classroom, or it's in the counselor's Google Classroom. If either of those things are things that your student or yourself have access to, you can find the hub there. And I believe it's been sent home in the parent newsletters for the middle schools as well, if you can find those.
Mm-hmm.
There was a question about how to register for WISE. You might want to explain WISE and then what the process looks like.
Sure. So how to register for WISE. WISE is not a class that you can register for ahead of time through the Infinite Campus system. WISE is a class that we have at Lakeview and at Ridgeview at the junior high level that specifically focuses on organizational skills, study skills, time management. Some of those executive functioning is how we talk about those types of skills to help students make sure that they're getting their work completed on time or catch up on missing assignments if that's something that they've fallen behind on. So we have a class devoted to those things where students can get some more targeted intervention for those skills and help kind of catch up on work that they've maybe fallen behind on. If you're interested in that class, you can reach out to me, because I will be your student's school counselor next year. I was going to say whoever your counselor is, but it's me. And we can have that conversation. And that's a class that we can talk about ahead of time before the year starts. We can also talk about at any point throughout the year. So that's based on teacher recommendation or parent recommendation or something that we observe in our data. But we can do that for the first quarter. I'm still getting used to saying that. Or we can reevaluate and see if that's something that fits better into quarter 2 or quarter 3 as the year goes on. More question?
They asked why the first lunch period is at 9:47. It seems really early for anyone to eat lunch.
9:47 is a very early time to eat lunch. With how the schedule, with how our day looks in terms of being the earliest start time in the districts and the number of students that we have to feed and our capacity within the cafeteria, we have to break it up into a certain number of lunch periods, and that's how it fits into the schedule. So it is a very early time, but that's how our schedule breaks down in terms of the number of students we have to feed and dividing them among lunch periods to make sure they have enough time to get through the line and eat.
Another part about that that I experienced personally as a staff member as well is that I'm usually eating breakfast around 5:30 or 6 because I have to be up and I'm getting ready for the school day. So that first lunch period starting at 9:47 is already, if I could do math, 4 hours, 3.5 hours, 3 hours after breakfast time in the mornings. Thank you, I tried. So it is early in the day, but it is pretty far from when a lot of our kids are eating breakfast as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a question of if a student has that first lunch period, are they able to have a snack later in the day, especially if they're an athlete?
Typically,
Yeah.
and you can correct me if I misspeak, but typically that is something that is a teacher by teacher basis, but is something that a lot of teachers are comfortable with. For students that have the early lunch for later in the day, as well as students that have that last lunch, some of their teachers will be comfortable with them having a snack earlier in the day, so that or during paw time, which will be at a different time next year. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we're still getting used to that. So that's
The
good.
other thing is our buses, like their buses may pick them up at 6:30.
Yeah. So again with the breakfast and lunch timing and snacks, the buses, your child's bus stop route might be picking them up at 6:30. So sometimes that breakfast happens earlier in the day. We have breakfast here at school when they get here as well. But that's kind of how the timing works out, as well as hopefully we answered the snack question somewhere in there.
Yes.
We already covered Spanish being high school.
Mhm.
Again, if you have any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat.
There's one that says, I read that Spanish is not recommended for 7th graders. Can you explain the reasoning for the recommendation?
Yeah, so Spanish is typically not recommended just because learning a new language is a very complex skill. And coming into the junior high, transitioning from the middle school to the junior high is already a very big transition. In addition to possibly having not only 2, but also possibly 3 electives throughout the year, that's a lot to throw on the plate of someone who's transitioning to a bigger school, a different environment. Again, not to mention just the more complex skill in learning a new language, but also potentially earning a high school credit for it. So it is not recommended for 7th grade. And it's just something to keep in mind as you're considering the options for your student. You obviously know your student the best. It's just one point to keep in mind.
Other questions?
Someone mentioned that at the bottom of the scheduling hub, the Google form where you'd enter questions is not accessible yet. We are working on that and it will be shortly.
They said it seems to only be accessible to the students.
Ah,
Interesting.
So I'm going to take out automatically collect
okay.
email.
So hopefully we'll be updating the Google form shortly so that families can access that and send questions as well.
The issue that was brought up is that at the bottom of the scheduling hub, the question submission form appears to only be open to students. So we're going to work on that so it can be open to families. So hopefully that'll be fixed shortly.
I think we can see questions in real time now.
Yeah, we can, yes.
Yep.
In terms of tryouts for fall sports, if you have sport-specific questions, the best thing to do is to reach out to the athletic department. Our athletic director is Lizzie Wilson. She is also the assistant athletic director for the high school. So I would start by calling North's athletic department and then getting more sport-specific information for fall sports. I know it varies depending on the sport. Some sports have some conditioning earlier on. But again, the best thing to do if you have any athletic related questions is to reach out to Lizzie Wilson at North. She serves as our building athletic director.
Final forms is how they're going to get, if they sign up for final forms, they will get communications on tryouts and start dates and everything.
And also, if you sign up or register through Final Forms, which is on the district website, that is also another way that you can get information on sports, tryouts, conditioning dates, because the coaches communicate really well through there. That is our district platform for athletics, and also where you can submit forms for the sport. So that's another avenue you can go through. I believe we're going to put a link to.
Not links, because links are not working. I'm
Okay.
telling them how to do it.
Okay, so Mrs. Hannigan is going to put some information about how to access Final Forms in the chat box. We'll stay on for a few more minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to get those in. Again, if you have any questions after this presentation, feel free to contact any one of us at the school, call the school. We understand you're probably not thinking of all your questions right now. So if you think of something later on, again, please feel free to reach out to the school.
We had a question about buses.
Yeah.
When can we know the buses that will be assigned to our kids? I don't know the answer, so I'm going to look at Ben.
Transportation information will come out later in the summer toward the start of the school year. That's in coordination with Peterman, which is our bus company. So that's probably months away, but you can expect to learn transportation information once we get much closer to the school year at the beginning of August.
And while we're waiting here for just any final questions to pop up, one thing that we are always excited about as we get closer to the start of the school year is our welcome days. So we'll do a small plug for that we'll have an opportunity to welcome you into our school, usually sometime beginning of August, right before school starts, to pick up schedules, tour the building, practice using a locker, all of those types of things, maybe meet some teachers or at least meet our counselors and admin team. So that you have some familiar faces when you get into the building for that first day of school. So we definitely encourage you all to be there. It's a great time. There's a lot of fun energy in the building with kids coming in for the first time and just getting to explore and see what the junior high is going to be like. So we definitely encourage you all to be on the lookout for information about welcome days as we get into the summer and closer to next school year.
So there's a question about, do they have to sign up for a bus?
Okay. No, you don't have to sign up for a bus. That again is run through Peterman. If you are new to the district or if you're in a new development, you might need to confirm information with Peterman. But typically, you do not have to sign up for a bus. No.
And then tell them that when after registration is closed, like I will send out a verification email that we can go to the parents and they can go over.
So as we wrap up scheduling that March 11th deadline, our admin counselor team will be sending out request verification forms. I got all the words in the right order there. That will just list the courses that you've been requesting in Infinite Campus, the ones that you signed up for, and you'll have a chance to verify, yes, that's what we signed up for. In that process as well, we'll work closely with the counselors and admin at the middle school. So if you have questions leading up to that March 11th deadline or after that with the course verification forms that are sent home, your counselors at the middle school level are super helpful as well.
It will be through an email, Infinite Campus email.
Infinite Campus email is how those will go home. I missed that.
We have a question about, is there a way to see what students have registered for through the parent portal? That's a good question. I don't really see the parent portal.
Yes, you can.
Yes, there is.
Hold on, let me log
We're waiting for Mrs. Hannigan, who also has access through the parent portal. My children are too young, so I don't really, I haven't gotten to that step yet.
They can log in.
If you give us 1 minute, we're going to get the information.
So that will go home or come out in an Infinite Campus email that you'll all get once registration has closed, which I know seems like probably too late. So we want to make sure you can have access earlier as well. So you can always go in through your student's account with them and have them click on course registration and find it. And then hopefully just a couple of point and clicks for the parent portal as well. As we're getting that information, we might have another question we can fill in.
Yeah, is there any EL courses or just support classes for students who are bilingual? So we do offer EL support classes. The best thing to do would be to contact the EL coordinator for the district. Her name is Elizabeth Curtis. I believe you might be working with staff members at your current school right now to prepare or register for those courses for next year. But we do offer some EL support courses for students who are learning the English language.
Okay, so on Infinite Campus, when they log into their parent portal, they're going to see a more option on the left-hand toolbar.
Okay.
Click on that.
So when you log into the parent portal in Infinite Campus, there is a more option on the left-hand side.
Click that, and then you're going to see course registration.
There will be a course registration option that should show
the 22-23 school year. If they click on that, you'll see what they
and you'll
have.
be able to click on the 22-23 school year, and you should be able to click on that and then see it.
Looks like Darian has figured that out as well.
Thank you, Darian.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to join us for this presentation. Again, if you have any questions, I'm sure you will after this presentation, please feel free to reach out to either the counselor at your current school, or if they don't know the answer, if you just want to reach out directly to us, we're more than happy to help you.
I put my email in the chat.
And Mrs. Hannigan, again, is our building principal. She has put her email in the chat. Again, thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your night.